Usually you fight some sort of boss. So obviously some of the original ideas for where you would end up at the end of the story involved some kind of giant tentacle creature that would come out of nowhere and be the boss for Mass Effect 3. But you know, it was just so video gamey, so video gamey, so video gamey. And that raises the question of, you know, like if video games are a medium for storytelling, do they always have to have an end boss? So video gamey, so video gamey, so video gamey.
Most of your time in Mass Effect 3 is spent shooting from cover at aliens. It's the first Mass Effect to include online multiplayer, dialogue is a minigame that adds a choose-your-own-adventure aspect, and numerous pseudo-RPG stats are maintained during a playthrough. Mass Effect 3 is the embodiment of the stereotypical video game, so why, when designing the ending, was it suddenly important to eschew the mechanics that had made its franchise so popular? The ending doesn't just forego a final boss, it boils all player choices in the trilogy down to a few yes and no's and a fork in the road. The only difference between all of the final scenes is what color they are. Add to that numerous continuity errors and you have a recipe for disaster. Casey Hudson says it was intentional.
I think one of the really neat things about video games as a medium is that there can be a message in them without making a statement.
The ending of Mass Effect 3 represents BioWare's mistaken assumption that being confusing equates to being meaningful or relevant. In the now confirmed indoctrination theory, all of the plot holes and errors are explained as a metaphor for Commander Shepard's thoughts while he's being attacked with mind control. That's as far as it goes. There can be no examination of Shepard's psyche because, as a dull player insert, he never had one. And the decisions he makes while being indoctrinated are framed the same way that all Mass Effect decisions are framed, with drawn-out dialogue establishing the different sides in a basic conflict. Giving him the option to fight back makes the indoctrination itself seem powerless, and in turn, the fighting back is made redundant by the palette-swapped final scenes. The real message of this has been overlooked because it's been cited so far as a major flaw. Mass Effect 3's ending says that all of your choices throughout the series were an illusion. This is absolutely true. If you kill off one character, they get replaced by someone identical, and half of the events of previous games are retconned by the time the intro is done. Each game has a definite arc with no major variation outside of temporary character interactions. In multiple playthroughs, you will see the same environments, the same characters, the same enemies. Mass Effect subscribes to a multi-universe theory in which variation only plays out microscopically, with macro events predetermined. In some games with branching narrative, this is not the case. In The Witcher 2, one story decision determines not only whose side you'll be on for the next 10 hours, but whether you'll get to see entire geographic locations. In Silent Hill Shattered Memories, dialogue, characters, environment, and puzzles all change based around the behavior of the player rather than telegraphed choices, and all branches represent different metaphysical perspectives on a single existing universe. Radiant Historia progresses through two interchangeable quantum branches while mending the future. The Stanley Parable consists entirely of choices and illustrates the techniques by which video games manipulate players. Unlike BioShock's encounter with Andrew Ryan, the ending of Mass Effect 3 is a commentary only on itself, and instead of elevating the game, it only serves to drag it down. It's like admitting you have a drinking problem and then continuing to drink. If any fruitful analysis of Mass Effect 3 is to be done, it must be done under the assumption that its theme was determinism. But analyzing the game proper would ignore that it was cannibalized for DLC. EA was reluctant to make delays and provide extra budget in order to ensure quality, but did allow budget for Appendix at extra cost to gamers. Every fan who pleaded for a fixed ending, at most, sped up a con that was already rolling. BioWare could have ended Mass Effect 3 with their trademark generic earnestness, but in the name of money opted instead for a pretentious insult. They're at the point of sabotaging the quality of their own work, assured of financial success regardless. Instead of cutting ties with Mass Effect 3, they cling to it, defending it and adding to it at the expense of their next game, Dragon Age 3. BioWare does not know how to let go, nor does the gaming press.
It makes me really concerned for the creation of fiction in our industry, and I think it sets a very dangerous precedent for all developers that are trying to tell stories in our industry.
Video game journalists still feel like they should battle to prove that games are art, in spite of the debate being dead. Since few of them have substantial knowledge of film, music, painting, or literature, rather than use direct arguments, such as the tone of a video game may be occasionally ruined by the player's free will, but the same can occur with actors during a live performance of a stage play, or anything can be art if we say it is, and art alone doesn't imply merit.
We live by worth and applied value, but everything is shit.
Video game journalists resort to examples. They rally around certain games regardless of merit because it is easier to say games are art because this game is art than it is to learn what games or art even means. This year, one such rallying point was Bastion, a collaboration between Supergiant and Warner Brothers, which had amateur animation, repetitive environments, overly simple gameplay, and a voiceover for storytelling. Reviewers wanted to tell you that it was innovative, but even the sole success of Bastion, the voiceover, had been used in video games ever since discs were able to store compressed audio.
And together, we're gonna build something grand. And remember, you ain't in this alone.
It was important to praise Bastion because it represented a chance to say that video games were art, not because it was an artistic achievement. It is by this token that journalists have been defending Mass Effect 3. Reviewers and news bloggers aren't interested in how poorly written the script is, how blank the faces of characters are, how many corners were cut, or how much of the game is spent with mediocre shooting. They're interested in BioWare's attempts at remaining contemporary, the clumsy romance, the sudden twist in the ending, the pointless choices, or the hilarious portrayal of post-traumatic stress disorder. To them, attempts at relevance are equal to actual relevance, and relevance is enough for them to defend it as art. So when fans began an online petition to fix the ending of Mass Effect 3, journalists lashed back, citing artistic integrity as a reason that nothing should be altered. The reasoning behind such a claim is based around auteur theory, but was Mass Effect 3 made by a single person? A visionary? Was Casey Hudson the writer, an actor, a modeler, a programmer, and a level designer? In writing the dialogue alone, multiple people were involved. There was no auteur or visionary behind Mass Effect 3, and designing it was a massive collaboration. Taking input from fans is no reflection on the talent of BioWare, but could theoretically help them regain their reputation for competence. Mass Effect 3, considered as art, doesn't exist until someone plays it, particularly considering its efforts to allow players to choose their own adventure. But BioWare, by adding multiplayer and being in charge of an MMO, is not only an artist, but a service provider. As a service provider, it is vital that they appease vocal dissent in their community.
You believe that this is the work of a vocal minority who haven't actually been all that friendly or helpful to BioWare.
But it definitely was the work of a vocal minority, and I would suggest a super minority, a very small group of people.
Even if it's a minority. When a service provider has no monopoly and begins rejecting the input of its clients, they are on the road to ruin. No dangerous precedent is set by a developer improving their game. This precedent has existed forever, and it is wholly outside of the realm of the legal system, meaning that though a precedent, it has no definite power over the game developers.
Many, if not all, video games are art, and better yet, they're a form of art that hasn't really been contemplated before.
The people at BioWare are making mistakes because they're worried about the so-called debate of games as art. The ending was their attempt at meta-commentary, and believe it or not, they think they're conveying emotion. By featuring bisexual romances in their games, BioWare tries to recapture the same praise that Star Trek received for putting the first interracial kiss on TV back in 1968. Never mind that that same episode featured this scene.
How can you let this go on?
As long as BioWare retains its staff of fanfiction writers and remains incapable of understanding criticism that isn't a veiled compliment, they will never reach their goal, particularly when their other stated goal is to appeal to fans of Call of Duty.
A system that really encourages you to be consistent. And that's when you press a button, something awesome has to happen. So button awesome.